We gather here this afternoon to honor one of the stalwart leaders of the labor movement of the national, indeed I might say the North American continent, Leo Gerard, President of the United Steelworkers, headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I happen to have spent 22 years just prior to coming to Wayne State in 2009. Is it working now? Okay. I was at the University of Pittsburgh for that many years, but I must say it is a pleasure to be at Wayne State. I enjoyed my years at the University of Pittsburgh, but I'm honored to be here. And one of the things I've done since I've been here is to host an event annually to honor labor leaders. I think it's important, albeit I'm a professor of business, to have an event every year as Director of Labor at Wayne, which honors labor leaders and provides an opportunity on this campus for them to hear their views about the issues of our time. There are many issues which are very pivotal to the future direction of our country, and I think that labor deserves, as much as any other group or constituency, a place at the forefront of the table. And I try through our programs and our activities not only to educate and train the next generation of union leaders, the rank and file, and also the practitioners in the fields of labor and management, but also inform the community, inform our student body, and inform through research and other activities about these issues. And over the past several years, we've honored such labor leaders as James Hoffa, Richard Trumka, Mary Kay Henry, and Joseph Hansen. Today, we are pleased, as I said, to honor Leo Gerard, who will be more formally introduced by one of his colleagues from the Steelworkers, Regional Director Michael Bolton. After a few introductions, Leo Gerard will speak to us and take some questions. Then we will have a short panel of other union leaders join him for a brief dialogue about the future facing labor unions. I now turn the podium over to the chair of the Wayne State University Board of Governors, Mr. Gary Pollard.
Thank you. Welcome to Wayne State University. Michigan is very lucky to have 15 fantastic universities. Here at Wayne State, we are the only urban-centered university in the state. Labor can consider Wayne State its home, and you should know that. On behalf of the entire board, I want to welcome you, but I want to take a minute to introduce some of my colleagues who are here with us today. First of all, we have Governor Dana Thompson. As I call you, please stand. Governor David Nicholson. And my right hand and vice chair of the board, Paul Masseron. Thank you. This is the 5th annual Labor Leaders Forum held by Labor at Wayne to honor our labor union leaders who have contributed so much to the progress of working families in the United States. Previous honorees include James Hoffa, Richard Trumka, Mary Kay Henry, and Joseph Hansen. We are so pleased to honor today International President Leo Gerard of the United Steelworkers, who is with us, of course, and we're looking forward to his comments. He will be introduced momentarily by Regional Director Michael Bolton. I also would like to recognize some of our school administrators. We have on deck, I saw Professor Ackerman, Bob. Is Bob still here? Please, Bob, stand up. Thank you. Dean Raskin. I haven't seen Dean Cheryl Waits of the School of Social Work, but if she's here, please stand. Okay. And also I'm expecting with us to join us at some point the Dean of the Law School, Jocelyn Benson. In addition, have I missed any other faculty or deans? Okay, thank you. I also would like to welcome all of our labor leaders, business, community leaders, and thank those organizations who sponsored today's events. Your support for labor at Wayne and Wayne State University is certainly deeply appreciated. Thank you again.
I'd now like to introduce Dean Wayne Raskin, who is the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Science and also a distinguished professor of the Math Department. Dean?
It is a great pleasure to be here, and I would just like to remind you, as I think some of you heard me say when I was here, I think it was 2 years ago, that that my dad was in the ILGWU, and I worked with him in the factory for 2 summers in South Boston, and he would so work would start at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we would leave at 6:30 to travel about 6 miles, and we would get there about 6:36. And in that time, he would talk about union business, and I would read math in the car. So but it was that union that actually sustained us through thick and through some thin as well, and so we are extremely grateful for that. We are very, very pleased to welcome you here on behalf of the college, and we are very proud to have Labor at Wayne, which, as has been said, contains, but is not limited to, the Douglas Fraser Center for Workplace Issues, the Labor Studies Center, the Master of Arts in Employment and Labor Relations, and the Labor Studies major, this is a great way for us to then connect the university with the community, and we are extremely proud of all of the people who have been trained through these programs, and they include members of the United Steelworkers, whose leader we are honoring here this afternoon. So I'd like to welcome you again, and we then look forward to these great words and to the panel discussion. Thank you very much. Again.
And now I would like to introduce Michael Bolton, who is the Regional Director, I believe, of District 2 of the United Steelworkers, and who comes, I'm correct, from the Paper Workers. And it's my pleasure to introduce him, who will introduce our distinguished speaker today.
I have the honor to introduce to you Leo W. Gerard, who's the International President of the United Steelworkers. The Steelworkers are the largest, most diverse industrial union in North America and the dominant union in paper, forestry products, steel, aluminum, tire and rubber, gas, chemicals, and petroleum. Under President Gerard's direction, the 850,000 member USW has heightened its focus on reversing the alarming decline of manufacturing in the United States. He has worked to inject workers' rights into trade agreements, on reversing the alarming decline of manufacturing in the United States. He has worked to inject workers' rights into trade agreements, investment priorities, and corporate governance. President Gerard has dramatically increased participation by steelworker members in the political process, and he has led campaigns against unfairly traded imports, often testifying before congressional subcommittees that handle issues related to trade and industry. During his tenure, the union has grown through organizing and through mergers with the American Flint Glass Workers, the Industrial Wood and Allied Workers of Canada, the Paper, Allied Industrial, Chemical and Energy Workers International Union, and other smaller independent unions. In recognition of the regional and global strategies of the USW's multinational employers, President Gerard has long championed strategic alliance agreements with unions throughout the world. In 2008, the USW joined with Unite, the largest union in the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, to create Workers Uniting, the first global union. The son of a union miner, President Gerard started working at Inco's nickel smelter in his hometown of Sudbury, Ontario, Canada at the age of 18. Inspired by a lifelong commitment to economic and social justice, he rose through the ranks of the union and became the Steelworkers' 7th International President. Prior to his election as International President, he served as the union's International Secretary-Treasurer, as the National Director of Canada, as the Director of District 6 in Ontario, and he was appointed to as a staff representative in 1977. He also serves on the AFL-CIO's Executive Committee, as well as its Executive Council, and he chairs the AFL-CIO's Public Policy Committee. He's a member of the U.S. National Commission on Energy Policy and is a founding board member of the Apollo Alliance, a nonprofit public policy initiative for creating good jobs in pursuit of energy independence. He's also the co-chairman of the board of the Blue-Green Alliance, a national partnership of labor unions and environmental organizations dedicated to expanding the number and quality of jobs in the new green economy. Please welcome my president, Leo Gerard.
I have to say that every time I hear one of those PR department well-written introductions, I wish the hell my mom and dad were around. But, I want to thank the school for the invitation. I want to thank Dennis and Mike for being here, Mike Bolton for the kind introduction. And I can tell you that as late as just before I got up, I'm not quite sure what I was going to talk about. I've scratched myself a bunch of notes, and I really feel like I want to watch the time so I can get some time for questions. But I also want to, I think, spend some time on 2 or 3 issues. And I would be less than honest if I didn't say one of the greatest issues facing us right now today is another rotten trade deal that's being brought to the fore. And I can tell you that this morning Senator Bernie Sanders refused to give unanimous consent, and so the Senate had to go into adjournment, and they're supposed to come back at 4 o'clock today. And I know that we're going to try to do everything we can to prevent PNTR from passing. PNTR, fast track from passing. I'm going to get into PNTR later. Fast track from passing. And part of the reason I want to do that, we want to do that, and I spent lots of time in Washington last week, and all of the meetings that I had with members of Congress, whether they were from the Senate or from the House side, my approach was, why don't you let history be your guide and find what trade deal, starting with NAFTA, CAFTA, PNTR, the Korea trade deal, find me one that resulted in more jobs for American workers and upward pressure on wages. And if you can't find one, then you're doing a huge disservice to this country and a huge disservice to the next generation by promoting another trade deal that's going to lead to the export of our jobs. Somebody needs to tell me, why do we need a trade deal with Vietnam? Somebody needs to tell me, why do we need a trade deal with Brunei? Why do we need a trade deal with Malaysia? Why do we need another trade deal at all? I got this sense of frustration when I think about what's one of the most valuable things on the planet if you're in business. If you're in business, one of the most valuable things on the planet is access to the American market. You have it by being here, and if you leave the country to go somewhere else, why should we welcome you back as if you were still here? Why should we give you the right of another country or another company from another country to sue America? Why should we let you go to that other country and then be the beneficiary of currency manipulation? One of the new congresswomen from Michigan, Debbie Dingell, said to me in time we were together, and maybe Ford or GM or Chrysler folks in the room could verify if this is accurate. The average car being shipped from Japan to America because of Japanese currency manipulation has somewhere between a $6,000 and $7,500 economic advantage because of Japan's currency manipulation. Let's assume that that's 50% wrong. Why should you get a $3,000 advantage over an American-made car? When Mike talked about us being the most diverse union, we have about 350,000 members that could make something that could end up in a car. And so when we saw what was happening when China said they were going to export more than, that was the term, more than $100 billion of auto parts to America by the end of 2016. That was a public pronouncement made by the Chinese senior authorities. Think about that. $100 billion. So the steelworkers attempted to launch a trade case because we knew they were cheating. We ended up starting to work with the administration, and we ended up hitting a roadblock. Not because they weren't being cooperative, but collectively we couldn't determine what was an auto part. Are we bringing a case against mufflers? Are we bringing a case against tires? Are we bringing a case against brake shoes? Are we bringing a case against seat belts? Are we bringing a case against glass? What is it we're doing? And so we worked very closely with the administration, the USTR, and some folks in the President's Economic Advisory Committee, and with some ability of USTR to get some Mandarin translation, we concluded that every auto part that China ships to America has an export subsidy. They determine what an auto part is, and they give it a subsidy. So if you look at those figures, my little notes tell me that from 2008 to now, China's exports of auto parts have gone up 1,000%. Our collective employment in the auto parts industry in America is down by 36%. That's just auto parts. This little folder we used last week when we were in Washington for our legislative conference, each one of these lines represents a trade case that the steelworkers have been involved in. Between 2011 and 2005, we're involved in 27 cases. Those cases are in tire and rubber, and I'll say something about tire and rubber. Those cases are in different kinds of coated and uncoated paper. Those cases are in different kinds of steel products. Those cases are involving glass products. And I can guarantee you now, because we have some history to look at, of the 27 cases, we're going to win 23, or we've already won 23. The others are still in dispute and not quite finished yet. That comes from letting China into the so-called WTO through PNTR, and we can win any case we take before them because they cheat on every product they're going to send here. And so for our union, and I think for the labor movement, and I say this in a broad way, the whole of the labor movement, never before, I've been active in the AFL-CIO now for close to 15 years. Never before in the history of the AFL-CIO has every single union pledged unity on the issue of fighting fast track. Every one of us pledged that we're not making any more donations to anybody about anything till this is over. And then I suspect we'll evaluate everyone. And the reason that we can do that is because we're letting history be our guide. There's not one trade deal that has resulted in net job increases, has resulted in net upward pressure on wages. And in fact, I'm not an economist, and I'm quite proud of that. I'm also not a lawyer, and I'm really proud of that. Is this the law school? Better watch what I say here. Oh, okay. That's still pretty damn close. But the transfer of wealth is what happens in a trade deficit. You never ever hear that discussion on mainstream media, whether it's electronic media, whether it's newsprint, and unless it's from progressives on the left, you don't hear it in the social media very often either. But if you look at what's happened since NAFTA, the huge trade deficit we have with Mexico, the unbelievable. Why do we need another trade deal at all? I got this sense of frustration when I think about what's one of the most valuable things on the planet if you're in business. If you're in business, one of the most valuable things on the planet is access to the American market. You have it by being here, and if you leave the country to go somewhere else, why should we welcome you back as if you were still here? Why should we give you the right of another country or another company from another country to sue America? Why should we let you go to that other country and then be the beneficiary of currency manipulation? One of the new congresswomen from Michigan, Debbie Dingell, said to me in time we were together, and maybe Ford or GM or Chrysler folks in the room could verify if this is accurate. The average car being shipped from Japan to America because of Japanese currency manipulation has somewhere between a $6,000 and $7,500 economic advantage because of Japan's currency manipulation. Let's assume that that's 50% wrong. Why should you get a $3,000 advantage over an American-made car? When Mike talked about us being the most diverse union, we have about 350,000 members that could make something that could end up in a car. And so when we saw what was happening when China said they were going to export more than, that was the term, more than $100 billion of auto parts to America by the end of 2016. That was a public pronouncement made by the Chinese senior authorities. Think about that. $100 billion. So the steelworkers attempted to launch a trade case because we knew they were cheating. We ended up starting to work with the administration, and we ended up hitting a roadblock. Not because they weren't being cooperative, but collectively we couldn't determine what was an auto part. Are we bringing a case against mufflers? Are we bringing a case against tires? Are we bringing a case against brake shoes? Are we bringing a case against seat belts? Are we bringing a case against glass? What is it we're doing? And so we worked very closely with the administration, the USTR, and some folks in the President's Economic Advisory Committee, and with some ability of USTR to get some Mandarin translation, we concluded that every auto part that China ships to America has an export subsidy. They determine what an auto part is, and they give it a subsidy. So if you look at those figures, my little notes tell me that from 2008 to now, China's exports of auto parts have gone up 1,000%. Our collective employment in the auto parts industry in America is down by 36%. That's just auto parts. This little folder we used last week when we were in Washington for our legislative conference, each one of these lines represents a trade case that the steelworkers have been involved in. Between 2011 and 2005, we're involved in 27 cases. Those cases are in tire and rubber, and I'll say something about tire and rubber. Those cases are in different kinds of coated and uncoated paper. Those cases are in different kinds of steel products. Those cases are involving glass products. And I can guarantee you now, because we have some history to look at, of the 27 cases, we're going to win 23, or we've already won 23. The others are still in dispute and not quite finished yet. That comes from letting China into the so-called WTO through PNTR, and we can win any case we take before them because they cheat on every product they're going to send here. And so for our union, and I think for the labor movement, and I say this in a broad way, the whole of the labor movement, never before, I've been active in the AFL-CIO now for close to 15 years. Never before in the history of the AFL-CIO has every single union pledged unity on the issue of fighting fast track. Every one of us pledged that we're not making any more donations to anybody about anything till this is over. And then I suspect we'll evaluate everyone. And the reason that we can do that is because we're letting history be our guide. There's not one trade deal that has resulted in net job increases, has resulted in net upward pressure on wages. And in fact, I'm not an economist, and I'm quite proud of that. I'm also not a lawyer, and I'm really proud of that. Is this the law school? Better watch what I say here. Oh, okay. That's still pretty damn close. But the transfer of wealth is what happens in a trade deficit. You never ever hear that discussion on mainstream media, whether it's electronic media, whether it's newsprint, and unless it's from progressives on the left, you don't hear it in the social media very often either. But if you look at what's happened since NAFTA, the huge trade deficit we have with Mexico, the unbelievable trade deficit that we have with China, the accelerating trade deficit we now have with South Korea. If you accumulate those trade deficits, depending on, again, which economist you support and accept, it comes to, since 2001, in roughly 13 years, it comes to almost $11 trillion. I have a hard time with this number. What's a billion? A billion is 1,000 millions. What's a trillion? It's 1,000 billions. We've got almost $11 trillion in accumulated trade deficits. since the passage of NAFTA. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out where the jobs are and where they're going. And when we get told that they're going to bring manufacturing back, with all due respect, they want to bring that manufacturing back in many sectors by saying, we'll come back, but you got to compete with the Chinese or Mexican wage. You never hear on television, on the Sunday morning political shows or the morning interview shows, or in most of the written media, you never hear the discussion about how did we get all this income inequality in the last 25 years. If you look at the deindustrialization, prior to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, before that even hits the street, we've lost 60,000 factories in the last 10 years. They didn't all go bust and quit making stuff. Some may have. And maybe some should have. But most of those 60,000 factories left and went somewhere. How many of you ever been to the Maquila zone in Mexico? Raise your hand. Isn't that shocking? Isn't that shocking? We were told when NAFTA passed that that would help stem the flood of unregistered, undocumented immigration into America. Yet it did just the opposite. You go 2 miles across the border. On this side of the border, people might be making the minimum wage, and for them that's a high wage from where they left. 2 miles inside the border, people live in cardboard boxes. And now you can read that Mexico has gotten cheaper than China. And with all due respect to my friends in the auto industry, both the big three and the non-big three, they're building too damn many plants in Mexico that they should have been building here, because this is where their market is. And that's a fight we've got to have. So I wear this button, and I wear it with pride for a number of reasons. The institution that sends these buttons around is called the Alliance for American Manufacturing. And it's a partnership of the Steelworkers Union and most of our major manufacturers who support our fight to keep manufacturing in America. And when it comes to the fight to keep manufacturing in America, I want to tell you that I'm tremendously proud of what our president did, what the auto workers did, and what the steel workers did during the auto collapse. That auto collapse didn't happen because of workers. It didn't happen because our pensions were too high. It didn't happen because auto workers or workers at GM or workers at Goodyear or workers at US Steel made too much money. It happened because the financial institutions collapsed and you couldn't borrow enough money to buy a car, even if you want to. I could remember driving up one of the streets that we call McNightmare in Pittsburgh on my way home, and it's all full of car dealerships. I can remember driving home and seeing not one buyer in any of those car dealerships. It wasn't because the cars weren't good, it's because they couldn't get any damn money. And what we had those fights, and we went, and the steelworkers went. We went to 11 cities in 4 states in 3 days, saying, keep it made in America. And if it wasn't for what President Obama did, I can tell you that most of us wouldn't be in this room. So, you know, when I try to think about what should I talk about, you know, I can talk about the labor movement and all the flowery stuff and all the good stuff we do, and you know, all the stuff that most of you that know something about labor already know. But what I want to tell you is that this fight right now about this trade deal and this fast-track proposal is going to cause, as Diane Woodard said in an article she wrote, it's going to cause most of us from this generation to say, what do we tell our kids and grandkids? That's how she closes off her article. And if this trade deal goes through, and we have Japan, currency cheat, South Korea, I want to tell you a story about South Korea in a minute, China, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei. I don't want my grandkid to be sitting at some table sometime and being told across the bargaining table, you know, kid, you got to meet the Bernese price, where they have forced labor. Women aren't allowed to drive cars. They actually practice Sharia law. That's their business. I don't give a damn. But why should I have to compete with them? These are crucial issues that face this country. And what our union is trying to do, and I'm so proud that some of our women of steel are here, some of our steel workers are here. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build an activist union. We've created a Women of Steel's program where we've got 4,000 women who are active regularly, communicating with themselves. We don't do the hiring, so lots of times in our workplaces there aren't enough women, so we try to bring them into the process. We've got a rapid response system that's got 20,000 people connected to it that we can communicate. It's nonpartisan. It doesn't take political sides. It provides information. We're building, as Mike said, a rank and file political program. We're not going to pay a bunch of damn consultants to tell us what we already know. And what we know is that if we don't get out in the street and educate workers, educate their families, educate the community, we can't win. And then that part of it is, I guess, the other part that really pisses me off. I get up this morning and I'm going through to the restaurant and I pick up something called USA Today. And the headline of USA Today is "The Kochs to Play Kingmakers." They're going to interview 5 candidates for president. They're going to interview, where are these dumb bastards? They're going to interview Scott Walker, Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, who's an embarrassment to Canada, Rand Paul, and Marco Rubio. And they view one of those 5 people as going to be their candidate for president. And what really irritates the hell out of me is that they're arrogant enough to let it be known. We're going to interview which one of you guys is qualified for we to buy you for president, and if we can buy you for president, we're going to give you $300 million. If that was happening in another country, we'd try to invade them. You know? And then when I talk about trade, let me tell you, I have a terrific ally in the trade fight in the corporate side. And this is what he says. Every trade agreement we have entered into has resulted in net drain of jobs and the economy for everyone. We have been assured every time that just the opposite would be true, and it never has been. Who said that? Dan DeMico. Does anybody know who Dan DeMico is? Dan DeMico is the former president and CEO of Nucor, one of the most anti-union companies in the country, but he's our partner on trade. So sometimes you're not sure who you're sleeping with till it's over. You know, but you got to find your allies. And I say this often to our members. I can't guarantee if we fight we're going to win. I'd be dishonest. But I can guarantee if we don't fight we're going to lose. And we have to pick our fights. And if we let history be our guide in the next couple of weeks, depending on what's going to happen in the Senate and what's going to happen in the House, and some people say we have a month and a half, some people say we got 3 weeks till this thing becomes on fast track, becomes final. We collectively have an obligation, whether you're from the business community, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're an economist, whether you're a worker, whether you're a local union officer, whether you're an international president of a union. We have an obligation to do everything we can to make sure that if there's a trade deal that's going to be passed, that it ought to be good enough for everybody to see. And if it's good enough for everybody to see that it's going to make American workers net beneficiaries of more jobs, new jobs, better wages, better benefits, better working conditions, then we should vote for it. But we shouldn't vote for a trade deal that's negotiated in secrecy. We shouldn't support a trade deal that has no transparency. We shouldn't support a trade deal that lets state-owned enterprises. We may not think about this very often in North America, but in China, half those facilities are owned by the Chinese, or they're partners with a company where they want their patents and they want their operating certificates. We shouldn't have a country or a trade deal where we don't know where the origin of the parts or origin of the food came from. If you can't tell us the rules of origin, You can't stop currency manipulation. You can't tell us if it's being run by a state-owned enterprise that we have to compete against. Why the hell should we have a trade deal like that? In the long run, this does not benefit American business or American workers. And to me, that crisis that we're facing right now is really crucial. Then I can go into some of the other stuff that getting the election out, getting the money out of elections. I'm optimistic. I tell you a story. A long time ago, when I was a new board member on our executive board, Lynn Williams was making a presentation about how to fight through one of our crises in the steel industry, and I think that's when they were doing Hands Across America. And one of our directors, Buddy Davis, said to Lynn, "God damn it, Lynn, take your rose-colored glasses off. It's not getting better." And I, as a new board member, thought, yeah, Buddy's right. But then as I got to be the president of the union, you can't do this job if you don't wear rose-colored glasses. You got to believe every day, if you do the right things, you have an opportunity to make this a better country. And if you make it a better country, you make it better for our members. Or you do it the other way. Every day you have a chance to make something better for your members. And if you make it better for your members, you're going to have a better country. The minute that you get up in the morning, whether you're the Vice President of Labor Relations at Goodyear, or whether you're the President of the Steelworkers Union, the morning that you get up and you think you can't make it any better, that's the morning to quit. Because by then you've admitted defeat. And I can tell you that defeat isn't going to come easy to the steelworkers. We're going to fight till we win the goddamn thing. Then I want to say a couple words about two of the organizations that Mike mentioned. I was a founding member of, one of many, I should say, founding members of something called the Apollo Alliance. And what we wanted to do with the Apollo Alliance was to be able to show that there was enough opportunity in taking carbon out of the atmosphere that we could actually create millions of jobs in a new economy. And the reason we called it the Apollo Alliance is that when President Kennedy wanted to send someone to the moon in 10 years or less, he called it the Apollo Project. We said our Apollo Alliance could create this many millions of jobs in 10 years or less. And the Apollo Alliance was a group of business, environmentalists, and trade unionists. It got stymied up in all kinds of difficulty in trying to raise enough money to keep it afloat. So we then created something different called the Blue-Green Alliance. And the Blue-Green Alliance again was simply two organizations, the Sierra Club and the Steelworkers. And we knew we'd have lots of disagreements with each other because what they do we don't always agree with, and what we do they don't always agree with. But we set three issues. Climate change we would recognize and try to do something about. Toxic chemicals we would take on, and trade. The Blue-Green Alliance has now grown on those fundamental issues, broadened out to, if you take the membership of the member organizations and you put them together, the Blue-Green Alliance has something like 14 million affiliated members through our organizations. And then what we've started to do was take strategic positions that would give us an opportunity to grow jobs in the green economy, even though we disagree with each other on certain things. So I'm going to run through some of those that we think we can make a difference on. Mike Langford sits on the committee of the Blue-Green Alliance, and one of the fundamental issues is when you talk about infrastructure rebuilding, Mike will be able to tell you later, I can't remember the numbers, but he knows them offhand, how many billions of gallons of water we lose leaky water lines. How many leaks of methane that we lose, and by the way, methane is, again, depending on which scientist, anywhere from 25 to 100 times more dangerous than carbon. And we have methane leaks going on all over the place. Every now and then you'll see where a gas explosion occurred and the neighborhood got blown up or an apartment building got blown up. Sometimes, but not every time, that happens from a well-known previous gas leak from methane. What could we do, keeping in mind that more than 50% of our schools are more than 60 years old? What could we do if we recognize that most of our public buildings are more than 75 years old? What could we do if we had a program of rebuilding all the bridges and overpasses that are condemned? Art Kroll, who drove me here, said we got to go in this road because we don't want to go in that road because chunks of cement fall off that one. I would just want to make sure he was picking the right route when he was doing that. You know? But if you think of all that and that opportunity, and you think about this button that I'm wearing, keep it made in America, and if we could have politicians that would say, we're going to have a 20-year program. For over 20 years, we're going to retrofit our oldest public buildings, and we're going to fix our oldest and most dangerous bridges. And we're going to do industrial retrofitting. We're going to partner with our employers. We did one. The Blue Green Alliance did one with ArcelorMittal. We did $36 million heat recapture program. That $60 million heat recapture program is paying off itself. And it was the equivalent of taking 60,000 cars off the road. So if we talk about carbon reduction, methane reduction, water saving, and those kinds of things, and we retrofit, and we do it with a commitment to make it in America, which, by the way, will become illegal in these trade agreements. So you'll be forced to say, well, China can do it cheaper, so, you know. And so these are huge, important fights. And my personal view, and I think our board's view, is that we participate aggressively in the Blue Green Alliance. And part of the reason we do is that's the forum where we can all come together and we can fight for these kind of climate improving circumstances, but at the same time create meaningful jobs in this country. I mean, I think we represent workers at Carrier Air Handling Systems and Train. If you said to Carrier, we're going to have a 20-year program of retrofitting our public buildings to have the most efficient air handling equipment, heating and cooling equipment on the planet, I can guarantee you that Carrier would get into an aggressive research and development program with some universities, and within 20 years we'd have even more efficient systems. But when you say that we're going to fund this road, the highway bill for 2 years, it takes you 2 years to get a damn permit, you know? And those things, and if we don't have a strong domestic content requirement, we'll end up like the Bay Bridge in San Francisco to Oakland, 10 years behind schedule and $6 billion over budget, and still today they're planning on possibly condemning it because everything came from China and they won't hold the weld. So those things are important. And I want to just say a brief thing about the experiment that we're having. Time flies by. I didn't realize it was as long as Mike said since we did our stuff with Unite the Union in Great Britain. We started 15 years ago. We started having internal struggles and building some alliances with our North American industrial union partners, where we wanted to get 2 global secretariats shut down and merged into one. We had the ICEM and we had the International Metal Workers Federation, and they each represented what we would consider industrial workers, and quite often you couldn't get anything done because it was the others' fight over jurisdiction. And it took us about 10 years to get that put together, and we got it merged into one organization now called Industrial, and it's the global secretariat for workers and for unions that has about 50 million affiliated members and has offices and can be our voice around the world. But in addition to that, the steelworkers created an alliance, stronger than an alliance. We created a very strong strategic partnership with the Mexican Mining and Metalworkers Union. The Mexican Mining and Metalworkers Union has about 250,000, 260,000 members. It's the dominant independent union in Mexico, and it represents some of the same workers we do in mining and metal, in fact, some of the same companies. They are now part of our international executive board, we're part of their board. We always have a bit of trouble with the translation and who's going to talk, but it's well worth it. That's a very strong partnership. The UAW has worked with us on that, and we've collectively went and helped them organize facilities in Mexico, because if they organize facilities, raise their wages, that helps us as well. Then we've got strategic alliances with the CNM CUT in Brazil. And again, in that one we do exchanges. They come and spend time with us. We go spend time with them. We learn each other's culture. We share some of the same employers. And in some of those same employers, we actually will help each other in bargaining. And my hometown employer is actually a Mexican or a Brazilian company now. And so the workers from Brazil will come and sit with our bargaining committee and do that kind of stuff. And it's a slow step, but it's evolution. We have very, very strong partnerships with the two industrial unions in Australia. The Australian Workers Union, the CFMEU. We're also trying to convince them that they should merge, but we got to be very careful, because I don't like anybody telling me what to do. They don't like being told what to do either. But we're inching them along, because we think that would be good for them and eventually good for the global labor movement. We have a strong relationship with the South African Miners Union and our partners with them. We have a bit of a relationship with IG Metall, not nearly as good as the UAW one. And part of that is I got in a shit fight with their president. He doesn't like me and I don't like him, but he's now gone, and I'll have to go back and kiss somebody's ass and get myself back in there. There's no use below it. I mean, no use pretending it's not the truth, right? You know. So, but then we did something very unique, and we created a brand new global institution, and it's called Workers Uniting. It's Unite the Union in Great Britain, Unite the Union in Ireland, the Steelworkers Union in the United States, and the Steelworkers Union in Canada. And we created Workers Uniting, and it's now a registered trade union in 4 countries. And we, excuse me, we do a lot of work. We do a lot of work together. And we're to the point where, in particular in the paper industry, in a bit of other industries, but primarily in the paper industry, we actually sit in each other's bargaining. Folks from Unite, Workers Uniting, will come to our bargaining kickoffs. They'll sit at the table. We'll end up having someone go to theirs. They sit at the table, and it's now becoming not a surprise to some of those employers. But we also did something very unique. We didn't affiliate to the international, or to the so-called AIMF. We didn't affiliate to Industrial as independent organizations. We affiliate to Industrial as Workers Uniting. So Workers Uniting now represents active and retired members, and affiliated to Industrial of 3 million workers. That gives us a stronger voice within that network, and it gives us an opportunity to, through that network, to try to do some things with other employers. As an example, there's a European Honeywell Council, Workers Council with Honeywell. We're just finishing our second lockout with Honeywell. So when we showed up as the Workers Uniting seat on the Honeywell Council, Honeywell canceled the meeting, which I thought was great, because that pissed everybody in Europe off, and now we got stronger allies. So things happen in funny ways sometimes. So those are things that we've been trying to do. And as I said, trade is one of our big fights. If the steelworkers weren't fighting in front of the International Trade Commission almost on a regular basis, I read out 27 cases in 3 years. And to put it in perspective, that's more trade cases in front of the International Trade Commission in the last 3 years than in the previous 10. The onslaught coming from already bad trade deals that are not being enforced is a tsunami of job loss. And I said I wanted to make 2 points. I'm going to watch the time. The first one is a coated free sheet paper case. we brought to the International Trade Commission through the Commerce Department, and we proved every allegation that we had made that China was cheating on all the pieces. But unfortunately, a couple of the companies that were involved in the trade case had made a profit. And the ITC said there hasn't been sufficient injury to warrant a remedy. 3 years later, we took the exact same case and we presented the now old facts and new facts who are consistent. And we won. And we got a remedy for 3 more years. You know why? Companies weren't making any money. We lost 7,000 jobs. We did a 421 case with the tire industry. We took the case because they didn't want to, for a bunch of reasons that don't need to be aired. We succeeded in that 421 case. The 421 has to be approved by the president. That was the first time any president under U.S. trade law had approved a case against China. First time. President Obama. So for everybody who's always ready to criticize him, you know, he's had the guts to stand up for our industries more times than anyone else. Anyhow, that within 6 months of that 421 remedy expiring, the Chinese put 50 million tires into the U.S. market. You can't make 50 million tires in 6 months. They had that ready to go. Well, we've now got another case on tires, and again, we're getting supported by our tire and rubber companies. We just succeeded at the end of last year, in the month of December, we succeeded in a case of oil country tubular goods against South Korea. South Korea built a brand new plant, fed it from its steel industry. And South Korea doesn't sell 1 pound of drill pipe in South Korea. And it doesn't sell 1 pound of drill pipe anywhere else than America. That plant was built to target our market. We filed the trade case. We won the trade case. They got a remedy. The remedy was a moderate, I won't say substantial, a moderate duty. And guess what South Korea did? They increased their exports to America. And what they're basically saying is, the hell with you. So how did they manage to do that? They probably got cheaper energy from their government. They probably got cheaper money from their government. They might have got an export subsidy. We've got to go find out. They might have got something else. Who knows what they got, but they ate the duty. We have 7,000 people laid off at U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel had just finished last year putting about $400 million into its pipe and tube mills, modernizing them, best mills in the country. We can make steel at lower man hours than anyone else on the planet. The United States steel industry, not just the United States Steel Company, but the United States steel industry met the equivalent of the Kyoto Protocols almost 8 years ago. So it's the most environmentally sound industry in the world. U.S. Steel built brand new Coke batteries in Clairton, making it the cleanest Coke batteries in the planet. We just sort of cut the ribbon on them 2 years ago. When will American manufacturers, American workers, and American politicians come to realize what Diane Woodard said? What are we going to tell our kids? What are we going to tell our grandkids? I'm proud of the labor movement. I'm proud that we're standing up fighting for American workers. I'm proud that we negotiate wages and benefits. I'm proud that when someone goes to work, that we're our position that they should come home with all their fingers and toes and their lungs are clean, and they should be able to see their kids in the morning and not have to worry about losing life and limb. I'm proud of that fact, and that's what the labor movement does. And I'll be damned damned if I'll apologize to anybody for wanting to fight for the jobs of our members and the jobs of the next generation of our members. And nothing is more important, in my view, for us to tackle the Kochs and the big money than mobilizing our people, educating our people, making sure that workers understand that there's people out there that are prepared to put them out of work, and they're the same people that often make it to office. And whether it's at a school board, whether at city council, whether it's at county council, whether it's at the state level, or whether it's federally, we need the voice of workers in those political arenas. And the voice of workers is the one that says we deserve to have a fair opportunity to have safe jobs and upward pushing of wages. Productivity, I mean, there's so much shit I could talk about. My brain's racing in 100 different directions. If our wages had kept pace with productivity, the average wage would be about $38. If our minimum wage had kept pace with poverty or with the productivity, we'd be up around $20. Productivity has gone through the roof. CEO compensation has gone through the roof. And during that same time, we flatlined our politicians by making them the most, probably the best politicians money can buy. So we got to change that, and that's it for me. Thank you very much. I'm pissed off.
What I think we'll do is that we will have our what we're going to do is take a few questions for Mr. Gerard, and then we're going to have a panel which will be about 15 minutes, and then they'll take questions from you. But any questions for Mr. Gerard? Please stand up and just give us your name, please.
Larry Keitel, UAW, and I'm wondering, with all the unions and everybody that's coming in and trying to tell the president that you can't do this newest trade negotiation, why is it, well, according to the media, I don't know how to media, but according to them, he still wants to pass it. I mean, why? I mean, isn't he paying attention, or what's going on with that? I don't understand why he isn't listening to all the people that are talking to him about telling him he can't have another deal like that.
Yeah, look at, if I knew the answer, if I was sure of the answer, I'd be screaming it out all over. I think I know the answer. I think we've got too many multinational corporations who see this as their opportunity to go and make higher profits by putting jobs in other countries. Some of them want to go there, they argue, so they can service that market. And my response to that, will service that market from here. That's what exports are for. Do that. Then I also think that there's huge, huge pressure from Wall Street. If you look at, and you know, with all due respect to the president, I have relationships with a lot of the folks around the president and the vice president. And the overwhelming majority of them never came from a workplace, came from a bank or a Wall Street or someplace like that. And so their view of the world is much different than ours. And somehow, if you get to be the president, you end up with this world view that is much different than ours. Then I have this other view that while we think that trade is promoted by Commerce Department and others, the hard reality is probably that trade is promoted by the State Department. Because I can walk you through, why would we need a trade deal with Colombia? Because Colombia is right next to Venezuela, and we don't like Venezuela. Why did we need a trade deal with South Korea when we already had pretty much a balanced trade agenda with South Korea? We need a trade agenda with South Korea so we can attach them economically to us, let them have to rely on us. We'll let them export all their shit here, then they can't survive unless we buy their stuff. we'll have a trade deficit, but they'll have to be closer to us because they're real close to North Korea. Why do we need a trade deal with Vietnam? Why did you pick Vietnam? I'm of the age that if I had been living in America, I'd either have been a draft dodger or I would have been in Vietnam. I think I know what I would have done. I didn't believe in that war no matter where I was. But now we've had thousands of kids die, get maimed, get injured because we were going to fight communism. Now we're told that having a trade deal with South Korea or with Vietnam is going to be good for America. God love capitalism. Why do we need that trade deal with Vietnam? We need that trade deal with Vietnam so they'll rely on us and they won't rely on China because China wants to move in on Vietnam. Why do we need a trade deal with Brunei? We need a trade deal with Brunei because the Sultan of Brunei is our ally in the Middle East, and if someday we even need to build a naval base, guess where we can build it? Maybe in Brunei. Because the Sultan of Brunei doesn't tolerate any shit. If you start lobbying and marching and wanting a union, he'll shoot you. You know? I mean, walk yourself through these and think, instead of thinking of commerce, think of State Department. And what we'll do is we'll sacrifice our jobs because we got lots of them. We're the best country on earth. We have the most open market. We'll do all that stuff. We'll find new jobs for our people, blah, blah, blah. But all these countries will rely on us. I may be full of beans or something else. But if you think about it, you got to find some rationale for them behaving in the way that they know is not in the long term good for us. So I think there's that economic piece, and I also think there's a huge role by the State Department. That's why it's going to be very interesting what Hillary Clinton does. She's dancing on the tightrope right now. Anybody else? Secret to not many questions is long answers. I learned that a long time ago. Don't be shy. Yeah. You're talking about the trade deal? Well, for those of you who couldn't hear at the back, it was about there's all the other countries that are part of the TPP. So, if how does it get ratified by all the countries? And if I think I got it right, and the difficulty is that none of the other countries will sign this deal officially till it's done in America. For example, the Canadian ambassador to the United States, Gary Doer, he publicly said that Canada won't move forward on any of the issues that are in dispute until fast track is passed in the U.S. because we got to know what the final deal is going to look like, and we should understand that everybody else is along for the ride. You know, New Zealand is going to tell America what to do. You know, and so everybody else is along for the ride and what they're going to sign up on. Now, there's a bit of a problem, and a separate trade deal that I never mentioned. It's the European trade deal. I forget the acronym for that one. And in that one, a number of the European countries are saying, hey, hang on a minute now. We're not going to sign on to a deal with the dispute panel where you can sue our country because we have higher standards than you. And so that's a separate trade deal that's going on. Plus, there's another trade deal that we don't hear about, which is a trade deal on finance that's going on with China. I think they call it the BIT. I forget what that acronym is for. That's why the fight on fast track is so important. If we defeat fast track, that means that the only way to pass that trade deal is for it to be transparent. And if it's as good a deal as USTR and others are saying, then it should stand or fall on its merit. And what the USTR is saying, as an example, well, we dealt with currency, or we dealt with this. They've got 150 amendments into the fast track that says what they call aspirational, that they will level the right to association in Vietnam over time. That's an objective. Well, you didn't do it in Guatemala, for Christ's sake. How you tell me you do it in Vietnam? And by the way, in Colombia, 100 workers of trade unions have been shot in Colombia since they signed the Colombian trade deal, and nothing's been done. So everybody else is along for the ride. When the deal is finished and up or down, that's what will happen in the rest of the countries. They'll vote for the deal America's finalized on. There may be some little wrinkle different, like, maybe Canada will say you can't touch our health care. But, big deal. They don't give a damn about that. Anybody else? Thanks, Merrick.
Thank you. Before we bring our panel up, I just have one small item, or one major item of business, I should say. We'd like to present you with a gift of our appreciation for your coming here today. It's a plaque from Labor at Wayne and the university that we'd like to give to you. 5th Annual Labor Leaders on Labor Forum honoring Leo W. Gerard, International President of the United Steelworkers, April 25th, Wayne State University, Detroit, Michigan, and it's made by a union producer. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mark, do you want to come up and introduce our panel? Dennis Williams, who is the president of the United Auto Workers, and Michael. Things over to you, Mark.
I'm magically turning the microphone into something that's portable by ripping the tape off. Merrick touched on Mike Langford is the Utility Workers of America president, and of course Dennis Williams is known to everybody in this room, president of the UAW. We asked them both to join Leo today because they're both located here in Michigan. So as we all know, these are very challenging times across the world for working people, for working families, and trade union organizations. What role is it for unions in the future, especially in these economic times? We headed up or we headed down?
The thing that comes to mind right away is that the rose-colored glasses. And the fact is that I just finished reading a book on John L. Lewis, and as bad as we have it now, they had it worse. And I actually think that we have the capabilities to bring people together. We're seeing the results of a decrease in labor negotiations, a decrease in trade unionism. And if you look around the world, I often say this comment. Look around the world and see where there's been a revolution, where there's been the overthrow of a right-wing regime or the overthrow of a left-wing regime or totalitarian regimes. It's always led by students and workers. I'm not advocating a revolution of that kind. I'm advocating a revolution at the ballot box, a revolution in participation. And I think once we start to do that, the labor movement will grow. If you poll people over and over and over again, and you ask a straight-up question, workers understand that they're better off collectively than they are individually if they want a voice in how their workplace is going to be. And the other point that I really believe in is the most democratic institution for the reallocation of capital is collective bargaining. And there's not a CEO on the planet that doesn't have a collective agreement with his board or her board of directors. So if it's good enough for the CEO, it should be good enough for us. And I believe that will come to pass. And I actually think the auto workers are going to lead us by what they're doing down south, by the way.
Well, thank you, Leo. It's really a great question because the labor movement right now is probably at a crossroads, the way I look at it. And the inequity in this country is so profound today. And even, a lot of people know that I sit on the board of directors at Navistar, right? And been there since 2006. And even CFOs and CEOs and corporate men and women are getting nervous about the decline of the labor movement. And I think we have a great opportunity as labor leaders and as institutional unions to lead the country in a different way, to actually bring working men and women together and say, we've had enough. And if we're going to make things change, we got to collectively change it together. In regards if it's a students union or non-union workers coming together. You know, I grew up in when I was coming through the labor movement, one of the hardest times that we had was during the 80s, and the 80s were what I called the Reagan years. How many remember the Reagan years? You know? And it actually convinced the American people that labor unions was everything that was wrong with America. And at that time, when you think about it, CEOs' pay was 40 times the workers' or the working pay in the United States. Today it's 390 times while decline of workers' pays in this country. So I think probably labor unions today are more relevant than they were in the 70s. You know, and I agree with Leo. If you look back at times when my father and many of your parents were coming through the labor movement, they had it worse. But that doesn't make it better. That means that we got to do more, and we got to find a way to bring students together, working men and women together, white collar, blue collar together, and say there's something wrong with America, and we've been speaking out about that. So I think there's a great opportunity here, and I think labor plays a role in this, a great role, and we have a responsibility not only to our membership, but to society as a whole. So.
You know, you see a lot of talk going on about raising wages in the country. You see the McDonald's workers, the fast food workers, the campaign on 15. You see these types of activities taking place around the country. You see the challenges that people are facing when it comes to just making a decent living. And Leo said it. The best possible way to raise wages, in my mind, is not through legislation, but it's through collective bargaining. And the best way of collective bargaining is through labor unions, right? I mean, these are the tactics and the things that we have to get back to. And the labor movement, I mean, life goes full circle. Let's face it, folks. I've heard people say before that you will not see change in this country until those that are normally not hurting start to hurt. So don't you think there's a lot of folks that normally haven't been hurting out there that are starting to hurt now? People that they keep talking about, that so-called middle class is going away. People who used to own cars and to buy houses and pay taxes. I mean, what a novel idea to have a society that can do those things, huh? You know, those things are starting to dry up and become more and more challenging. So as I can see, this is going to be an opportune time for labor and for the people of this country to stand up and finally take a stance and say, look, enough's enough. Things have got to change. And the best way to change it is through collective bargaining. That is, to me, the single, simplest, best way to make a change in this country is through collective bargaining. And so I see a lot of hope. I got those rose-colored glasses on every day because I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think we could make a change, right? You know, we're all up here for those reasons, and all of you folks in this room for those reasons. And we have to have that hope, because once you give up, then we've all lost. You know, we have all lost. So you can never give up hope, and you always got to get up in the morning and say, if I got to kick some ass, let's take it. I'll take a few lumps, but I'll throw a few punches back at the same time, right? So, hey, that's my view and my opinion. So,
I just wanted to, if everybody take out a pen and write this down. There's an article that I read recently that answered a whole bunch of questions for me that I never even understood, never even come close to thinking about. It's called "What's Wrong with Right to Work?" And it's written by Alex Bradshaw and Richard Becker. You can dig it up on the internet, I assume. And what it really talks about, the first sentence is exposing the racist legacy and corporate America's agenda. And it starts off by telling us that the first right to work states were the former slave states, and who was involved in creating the right to work movement through that group. and I think we should all, if we're interested in the future of the labor movement, read that. Then the other thing I've come across, and I don't know where the hell this came from, but I'll just ask you, you've got two neighboring states that you ought to look at, Wisconsin and Minnesota. In Minnesota, the governor increased taxes on the top 1%, increased investment in education, and increased services to the public. In Wisconsin, Walker cut taxes for the rich, slashed education spending in the budget, and attacked labor rights. Take those two sets of facts and go do some research, and then come back and tell folks at the center which state is doing the best. And by the way, give you a little tip, Minnesota has the fastest growing economy in the country.
Well, I would like to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. I appreciate it very much. I would also like to thank our panelists, Dennis Williams of the Auto Workers, Michael Langford of the Utility Workers, our guest of honor today, Leo Gerard of the Steel Workers, Michael Bolton of the Steel Workers. Thanks for coming again. I appreciate it very much, and have a good afternoon.